afraid now. But then I wasn't. I wasn't afraid. I was afraid. I was afraid when I saw the man in the road.
The man in the road?
I'd never been so afraid in my life before.
Tell me about the man in the road. It's all right. You're safe here. Tell me about the man in the road. Betty, don't fall asleep.
Today is May 4th, year 2025. This is J.J. Allen. And you are now in with us. So, open the door to your mind and let the unthinkable in. Today we are going to talk about an event that happened in 1961. This event is well known and categorized across the internet. And the event is called the Betty and Barney Hill incident. It's about UFOs.
Summer, and suddenly beer tastes especially good. So it's important that you have Schlitz around the house. Just look for the summer Schlitz display that asks, out of Schlitz? And under the question, an extra large supply of Schlitz 6-packs in pop-top cans at a special summer price. So don't be out of it this summer. When you're out of Schlitz, you're out of beer. Joseph Schlitz Brewing Company, Milwaukee, and other great cities.
First of all, I'd like to say that I do remember back in 1975 or 1976, somewhere in that timescape, that I did happen to see this movie about the Betty and Barney Hill incident. And, you know, like I've talked to you guys before, it's kind of interesting how, you know, when you're an older person like I am, I'm not elderly, but I'm older, and you seem to start remembering things amongst the decades that you have lived, and, you know, it's weird how the brain works. So I do remember watching it, and now getting a little bit interested in it again. I do remember that it made a distinct impression on me. But first of all, I'd like to talk about the movie itself. The main character, which played Betty Hill, was her name is Estelle Parsons, and for most people that have watched U.S. Regular television, ABC network, she actually played one of the most recent things is Roseanne Barr's mother. I don't remember her name in the series, but Roseanne Barr back in the late 80s and early 90s. Roseanne was a very popular ABC TV show, and they changed it over to the Connors. They had some controversy within Roseanne Barr and all that stuff. So anyway, I thought, wow, great older actress at the time. But what I have done, doing a little research on this today or last few days or week or so, is that basically I rewatched the movie again, called The UFO Incident, 1975. James Earl Jones played Barney Hill, and Estelle Parsons played Betty. Now, if you guys love stuff like this, go back on YouTube. It's got a cover of it on YouTube, and go watch it. Just watch it. It is really good. I didn't realize how good both of these actors were at the time, because when you're a kid, you're not paying attention to the acting. So anyway, it is a very intimate type of, I think they did an excellent job showing the dynamics of a man-woman marriage relationship and how people really act. And especially when they have a situation where they have got subconscious trauma, subconscious turmoil, in the relationship and how they're reacting to each other, how they're snapping each other, how they're getting into tiny arguments. First they're loving, and then it ends up one saying something wrong and all this. It is a good movie to go back and just watch if you like this kind of stuff, okay? So I wanted to go over that a bit. So now we're going to kind of go into the essay of the situation. And I'll kind of do a little commentary as we go along here, but I'm just going to go ahead and begin. Barney and Betty Hill were an American couple who claimed that they were abducted by extraterrestrials in a rural portion of the state of New Hampshire from September the 19th to the 20th, year 1961. The incident came to be called the Hill Abduction and the Zeta Reticuli incident because two UFOologists connected the star map shown to Betty Hill with the Zeta Reticuli system, which is incredible. Their story was adapted into a best-selling book, 1966, The Interrupted Journey, and the NBC's 1975 television film, The UFO Incident. Most of Betty Hill's notes, tapes, and other items have been placed in the permanent collection at the University of New Hampshire, her alma mater. In July 2011, the New Hampshire Division of Historical Resources marked the site of the alleged craft's first approach with a historical marker. The Hill story was widely publicized in books and movies throughout the last few decades. So a little background on both of them. The Hills lived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Barney, born 1922 and passed away in 1969, was employed by the United States Postal Service, while Betty, 3 years younger, actually she was 3 years older, was a social worker active in the local Unitarian congregation. The Hills were also members of the NAACP and community leaders, and Barney sat on a local board of the United States Commission on Civil Rights. They were an interracial couple, and at the time when it was particularly uncommon in the United States. And Barney was black and Betty was white. That was a very significant thing back then. Like I said before, I tell everybody my age all the time. Being 57, I do sort of remember, especially in the 70s, there was a stereotypical connotation to that sort of thing. It just was a product of the times. And what I find very interesting is that Barney Hill, from the amount of reading research I've done so far, he was a very, he's a private guy. He cared about his character. He cared about how he looked in society. And to be quite honest with you, I mean, these are different times today for this incident to happen and bring spotlight to himself, because they are interracial, was quite the thing that you probably just didn't want to do. You wanted to basically just live your lives as peaceful as you could. Now today it is total, it is just a normal situation. People don't care today. It is an open thing. And that was a long time ago, probably 60 something years ago, 63 or 4. So basically, for them to even come out and talk to people and gain publicity was, you're especially with Barney. Barney seemed like he was the kind of guy that really just liked to have a quiet life. He was very reserved. And he had suffered, here again, this is a touchy subject, but he had suffered. He's actually born in Newport News, Virginia, and had lived in Virginia. And then later his father, I believe, took him up into around the Philadelphia area because his father worked in the shipyards. down at Newport News. And the North was a little better, of course, than the South. It just was a product of the times. I'm glad things have changed. But basically, I think he learned to be a little. I think that he had suffered some trauma from. He talked about these hoodlum kind of kids. He talked about these guys in leather jackets and slick back ducktails, picking at him, basically made him nervous. And these things did happen. Unfortunately, I don't agree with it, but things did happen in those times. So he had suffered a little. He had suffered some trauma. Okay, some personal trauma within him. Within his relationship to society. Just put it like that. So I'm going to go off into the UFO encounter now. So according to a variety of reports given by the Hills, the alleged UFO sighting happened about 10:30 p.m. September 19th, 1961. The Hills were driving back from Portsmouth from a vacation in Niagara Falls and Montreal, Canada. Just south of Lancaster, New Hampshire, Betty claimed to have observed a bright point of light in the sky and moved from below the moon and the planet Jupiter upward to the west of the moon. While Barney navigated U.S. Route 3, Betty reasoned that she was observing a falling star. Only it moved upward because it moved erratically and grew bigger and brighter. Betty urged Barney to stop the car for a closer look, as well as to walk their dog, Delcy. Barney stopped at a scenic picnic area just south of Twin Mountain. So Betty, looking through binoculars, observed an odd-shaped craft flashing multicolored lights traveling across the face of the moon. Because her sister had several years earlier said that she had seen a flying saucer, Betty thought it might be what she was observing. Through binoculars, Barney observed what he reasoned was a commercial airliner traveling toward Vermont on its way to Montreal. However, he soon changed his mind because without looking as if it had turned, the craft rapidly descended in his direction. This observation caused Barney to realize this object was not a plane. So the Hills said they continued driving on the quiet and isolated road, moving very slowly through the north notch of the mountains in order to observe the object as it came even closer. And at one point, the object passed above a restaurant and a signal tower on top of Cannon Mountain and came out near the old man of the mountain. Betty testified that it was at least 1.5 times the length of the granite cliff profile, which was 40 feet long, and it seemed to be rotating. The couple watched as the silent, illuminated craft moved erratically and bounced back and forth in the night sky. About 1 mile south of Indian Head, they said the object rapidly descended toward their vehicle, causing Barney to stop in the middle of the highway. The huge silent craft hovered about 80 to 100 feet above the Hills' 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air and filled the entire field of view in the windshield. It reminded Barney of a huge pancake. Carrying his pistol in his pocket, he stepped away from the vehicle and moved closer to the object. Using the binoculars, Barney claimed to have seen 8 to 11 humanoid figures who were peering out of the craft's windows, seeming to look at him. In unison, all but one figure moved to what appeared to be a panel on the rear wall of the hallway that encircled the front portion of the craft. The one remaining figure continued to look at Barney and communicated a message telling him to stay where you are and keep looking. Barney had a recollection of observing the humanoid forms wearing glossy black uniforms and black caps. Red lights on what appeared to be bat wing fins began to telescope out of the sides of the craft, and a long structure descended from the bottom of the craft. The silent craft approached to what Barney estimated was within 50 to 80 feet overhead and 300 feet away from him. Barney, fearing being captured by these creatures, ran back to the car, terrified. As the Hills sped away, they heard a strange beeping sound, and they fell into a daze. When they awoke, they realized that they were now just outside of Concord on October 21st, 1961. Barney reported to National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena investigator Walter Webb that the beings were somehow not human. When they did get home, it was about dawn, and they'd still had some odd sensations and impulses that they could not easily explain. So Betty insisted that they keep their luggage out and not bring it in the house. I mean, the rest of the luggage that they had carried with them on their trip. And they had noticed that the leather strap from the binoculars were broken. I think it was broken or torn. And they could not remember how it got torn, or they could not remember how it got, tore up that way. And Barney noticed, and he was an impeccable dresser. And, back in those days, people had dress shoes that you wore for special occasions and whatnot, some probably regular work shoes, that kind of thing. So in those days, it was different. Now today, people have a different situation with any kind of shoes. But anyway, he noticed that the tip ends of his leather top end dress shoes were scuffed, and they were, scratched up, which means it scratched the leather, which was a big deal. Shoes were a lot back then. She noticed that her dress was torn and ripped a little bit, and it had some type of weird stain on it. So I think she just ended up taking the dress off and laying it out somewhere and leaving it alone. And he also basically began complaining that he felt something weird around, his lower torso, genital area, that something was bothering him. The Hills say they tried to reconstruct the chronology of events that as they witnessed the UFO and drove home. But immediately after they heard the buzzing sounds or the beeping sounds, their memories became incomplete and fragmented. And after sleeping for a few hours, Betty woke and placed the shoes and the clothing she had worn during the drive into her closet, observing that the dress was torn at the hem, zipper, and the lining, and later she retrieved the items from her closet. She noted a pinkish powder on her dress. She hung the dress on the clothesline, and a pink powder just blew away, but the dress was irreparably damaged. She said she threw it away, then changed her mind, retrieved the dress, and hung it in her closet. Now, over the years, 5 laboratories have conducted chemical and forensic analysis on the dress. There were shiny concentric circles on their car's rear trunk that had not been there the previous day, but Betty and Barney experimented with a compass, which is strange. So what she did is that Betty was close to her sister. Her sister actually, I believe, one of her next door neighbors was a physicist. So, and Betty was particularly concerned. Betty was especially worried about radioactive fallout from anything that might have occurred within this incident. And what she was told to do was just to take a regular compass and take it to the front end of the car, which she did, and it did not react. But as she came back to the back end of the car, that the compass started swirling, and it really started going crazy. And then she got a little bit nervous about that. So you got to understand that at the time within their dynamics that Barney was becoming irritable. Okay, just put it to you like that as a man. I think what happened is that his subconscious mind was really trying to dismiss that there had been any type of UFO abduction incident. I think that his subconscious mind was really trying very hard to not make this real, but at the same time, he's fighting, the reality of it. So Betty seemed to have a personality that was a bit more open, and she seemed to be a little bit better within that. She was more of an open type of human person about that. So basically what they ended up doing after Betty had called her sister, talked to her about that, and the physicist. And then basically they went ahead, and I believe they called, which I'll read out here, is that they called the Air Force. And she called initially, hesitantly that she had talked, was there any, trying to get some verification about what had happened. That, was there any other sightings? Did anybody else see this situation? What have you? So basically, Walter N. Webb, a Boston astronomer and NICAP member, met with the Hills on October 21st, 1961, and conducted a 6-hour interview, and the Hills related all they could remember of the UFO encounter, and Barney stated that he had developed a mental block, and that he suspected that there were some portions of the event that he did not wish to remember. And he described in detail all that he could remember about the craft and the appearance of the somehow not human figures aboard it. Webb stated that they were telling the truth, and the incident probably occurred exactly as reported, except for some minor uncertainties and technicalities that must be tolerated in any such observations where human judgment is involved. Things like time, length of visibility, apparent sizes, objects and occupants, distance and heights of objects, and things of that nature. So that was done. And then Betty began to have these really strange, nightmarish dreams. She was not sleeping very well. And 10 days after the alleged UFO encounter, Betty began having a series of vivid dreams, which continued for 5 successive nights. She stated that she experienced them with a degree of detail and intensity that she had never had before. And after the 5th night, they stopped and never reoccurred. Though they occupied her thoughts during the day, when she mentioned them to Barney, he was sympathetic, but not too concerned, and the matter was dropped. And Betty did not mention them to Barney again. And basically, I think she was beginning to really understand that Barney was having a hard time with this. And he was having a hard time just, encapsulating what he had experienced. And then he's, as the man, as the husband, she's coming to him. This was part of their problematic dynamic that was happening within them. So in November 1961, Betty began writing down in detail of her dreams. In one dream, she and Barney encountered a roadblock and men who surrounded their car. She lost consciousness but struggled to regain it. Then she realized that she was being forced by 2 small men to walk in a forest at night, and of seeing Barney walking behind her. Though she called to him, he seemed to be in a trance or sleepwalking, and the men stood about 5 feet to 5 feet 4 inches tall and wore matching blue uniforms with caps similar to those worn by military cadets. They appeared nearly human, with black hair, dark eyes, prominent noses, and bluish lips. Their skin was of a grayish color. She and Barney were taken to their car, where the leader suggested that they wait to watch the craft's departure. They did so and then resumed their drive home. So, this is the part where I think is pretty cool, where if you guys do happen to watch the movie, this old 1975 movie, again, I'm just telling you what I think, okay? They did a fantastic job with that. And we're not looking at CGI. They're not. Look, the aliens look a little weird, okay? I'm not going to say they don't. But for their time period, I think you can look past that and just look into the initial, because she's narrating this thing. The way they did the movie was really good, how they blended time lapses and they narrated a bit, and which I don't like very much, but it worked with this movie. And, it explained what had happened to them. She was pretty much made to, undress, take the dress off. And they did some skin scrapings, and they looked her over, and basically the worst thing of it was, you got to remember, this is 1961 technology. They took out a really long needle, and they told her through telepathy. So I think this might have been the first one where they talked about non-speaking communication. That's the other thing that really kind of got me, is that the non-speaking communication being, via telepathy. That's what, I don't think that has been ever, here again, this is 1961 to 1964 when they did the audio tapes. I'm not recalling any, I could be wrong, which is fine, but I'm not recalling any other abductees talking about that. But here again, I could be wrong. So basically, they explained to her that they were going to insert a very long needle into her navel for a pregnancy test. She said, "We don't do that here." What kind of test is that? She's protesting. She's a, here again, she's educated in what I liked about Betty is she's educated in the field that she knows, which is, she was in the social services. So she had a degree from that. So she was educated in that portion of her life, that she talked to people, she helped people, she understood psychology a bit, and social behaviors, okay? So, but other portions of education like sciences and maths and things like that, she was just an average person, okay? I think she was an average nice person. So she said, that's not how we do a pregnancy test here. They went ahead and inserted the needle into her navel, and she started screaming, and then the one leader put his hand over her forehead, and he said the pain is going to go away. And she said in the interviews that the pain did subside and it did go away. So let's fast forward in time to a thing called amniocentesis, where today, if they want to check the progress of the baby, I forgot what weeks it is, 28 to 32 or something like that, you've got a little, what they do is they insert a needle, and I've seen this done, insert a needle through the navel, take out some amniotic fluid and test the fluid to see if the baby's got any chromosomal type of defects or anything like that, or problems. So you're looking basically 50 years in the past that these little alien guys had this technology to understand, where we did not at the time. Okay, I still think that at the time they were taking urine tests to see if the estrogen levels had, the different levels of hormones had elevated for the pregnancy. So, it's kind of crazy. So, basically, I'll go on here a bit, but I wanted to talk about that. But anyway, the missing time element. So on November 25th, 1961, the Hills were again interviewed at length by NICAP members, this time C.D. Jackson and Robert E. Holman, Having read Webb's initial report, Jackson and Holman had many questions for the Hills. One of their main questions was about the length of the trip, and although the Hills had noticed that they had arrived home later than had anticipated, the 178-mile drive should have taken about 4 hours, they did not realize that they had arrived home 7 hours after their departure from Colebrook. When Holman and Jackson noted this discrepancy to the Hills, the couple had no explanation, a phenomena ufologists call the missing time effect. The Hills claimed to recall almost nothing of the 35 miles of U.S. Route 3 between Lincoln, Indian Head, and Ashland. Both claim to recall an image of a fiery orb sitting on the ground. Betty and Barney reasoned that it must have been the moon, but Holman and Jackson informed them that the moon had set earlier in the evening. The subject of hypnosis came up, and it was decided that it should be carried out in order to recover previous irretrievable memories. Barney was apprehensive, but thought it might help, and Betty put to rest what Barney described as the nonsense about her dreams. So this event seemed to have really rocked Barney Hill pretty hard. And he was having a hard time. He was very anxious. Afterwards, he worked for the Postal Service, and I think he had a 60-mile, I can't remember where he worked exactly, but he had about a 60-mile trip, a round trip, or just one way. It was a fair distance to work every night, or I think it was at nighttime. She was working the day. I think he was working at night as he did the process of mail processing. And it affected him a lot. He was not feeling well. He claimed to have had exhaustion a lot and fatigue, couldn't sleep well, headaches. And, he was having a very hard time because I think that his subconscious was really fighting against the idea of this because, I truly believe that this is something that he really didn't want to experience. I think this was an event that just came upon him, unfortunately. I really do. Poor guy. So, but a bit of relief came afterwards. So on November 23rd, 1962, the Hills attended a meeting at the parsonage of their church where Captain Ben H. Sweat of the United States Air Force was a guest speaker. Having had an interest in hypnosis, the Hills approached Sweat privately and related their strange encounter, and Sweat was particularly interested in the missing time of the Hills' account. The Hills asked if he would hypnotize them to recover their memories. Okay, so after Sweat had basically cautioned them, don't use an amateur hypnotist, they did get referred to a Dr. Benjamin Simon. And I believe he worked with World War II patients to help them through trauma, by my research, I believe. So he was very good at helping people reconnect their psyche. I believe there was one time where I read or saw an incident where a guy claimed that he could not walk. And through hypnosis, while he was under, he understood that he could walk. It was one of those weird things where there was a disconnect between what you think you can do and what you're physically able to do. It was a strange thing. Barney reported that the binocular strap had broken when he ran from the UFO back to his car. He recalled driving the car away from the UFO, but afterward he felt irresistibly compelled to pull off the road and drive it into the woods. He eventually sighted 6 men standing on the dirt road. The car stalled, and 3 of the men approached the car. Barney described the beings as generally similar to Betty's hypnotic recollection. He said the beings stared into his eyes with a terrifying, mesmerizing effect. Under hypnosis, Barney said, "Oh, those eyes. They were in his brain from the first hypnotic session. And I was told to close my eyes because I saw two eyes coming close to mine. I felt like the eyes had pushed into my eyes from his second hypnosis session. And all I see are these eyes. I'm not even afraid that they're not connected to a body. They're just there. They're just up close to me, pressing against my eyes." That's crazy. While Betty reported a conversation with the leader in English, Barney said that he heard them speaking in a mumbling language he did not understand, but Betty also mentioned this detail. The few times they communicated with him, Barney said it seemed to be a thought transference. At that time, he was unfamiliar with the word telepathy. So with Betty's sessions under hypnosis, Betty's account was similar to her 5 dreams about the UFO abduction, with some notable differences, mainly pertaining to her capture and release. Also, the technology on the craft was different. The short men differed significantly in physical appearance, and the sequential order of the abduction differed. Barney's and Betty's memories in hypnotic regression were, however, consistent with one another. When the series of hypnosis sessions were complete, Simon wrote an article about the Hills for the journal Psychiatric Opinion, explaining his conclusion that the case was a singular psychological aberration. So, but in the movie, and they had talked about how basically that, going through the hypnotic situation, kind of like, and I've been through therapy, see how therapy kind of does work, that it does release things from your psyche. I'm just saying that. So I spent about 3 years of my life working on myself to basically become a better person and feel better about my life. So, therapy, and I believe also with hypnotic regression, can help people to release trauma, to rediscover the baseline of who and what you really are about. And I think that did help the Hills out, because they had talked about how they did feel better. They were happier. They were released. It does release things inside of you. So with that, the post-hypnosis publicity and Barney and Betty Hill's continuation, the Hills went back to their regular lives. They were willing to discuss the alleged UFO encounter with friends, family, and the occasional UFO researcher, but the Hills apparently made no effort to seek publicity. On October 25th, 1965, a front-page story in the Boston Traveler asked, "UFO Chiller, did they seize the couple?" And reporter John H. Tuttrell of the Traveler had allegedly been given an audio tape recording of the lecture of the Hills that the Hills had made in the Quincy Center in late 1963. Luttrell learned that the Hills had undergone hypnosis with Simon. He also obtained notes from confidential interviews that the Hills had given to the UFO investigators. So on October 26th, United Press, UPI, picked up Luttrell's story, and the Hills earned international attention. So, I don't think that the Hills were, here again, I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning, that they were an interracial couple in 1961. And I believe that they really just wanted to live a normal life in peace and in freedom. I do believe that. Now, within this, I do want to get this out, is that Betty had, after the initial examination while they were inside the UFO craft, that Betty had said to the leader, I just want some type of proof that this happened. And there was some type of book. She said it was a large book, actually, that was laying there. And she said, I want that book. Can I have that book? And the leader at the time said, yeah, you can have the book. So it was written in a language or cipherings that she could not understand, but she just wanted it to go back, and have some type of proof. So she was leaving, and they stopped her and wanted to examine her teeth a little bit further. They looked at her teeth, they looked at her mouth, and kind of pulled at her teeth, and she said, what are you doing? And they basically told her that Barney's teeth did come out. He did wear dentures at the time. He had suffered an injury, I believe, when he was in the Army or the Air Force, facial injury, and he had to get dentures, okay? So that was the difference on that. And as she was leaving, they stopped her and said, no, you cannot have the book. So she was not happy about that because she really wanted the book. She really wanted the proof on that. And then she protested. She was not happy about that. And then there was a map on the wall. That's why it was kind of called the Zeta Reticuli incident as well, is because the leader explained that that's where they're from. So it was a binary star system that she didn't know. She did not understand anything about astrology. She did indicate that she's not the one person. If they want to talk to, there are several other people on the planet that knew a lot about astrology and knew a lot more than she did. She was just an average person. And they asked, do you know where you are? And she said, no, I don't know where I am to that. And he said, well, if you don't know where you are, then this star map is not going to help you very much to understand where we're from. You've got to have a point of origin. And she said it kind of made her feel kind of stupid. And, I'm sorry about that. But so in the post-hypnotic regressions, she had talked about the star map a little bit. So what happened is that the Simon asked her if she could draw the map. Well, he gave her some paper and a pencil or whatnot, and she actually drew the map out under hypnosis. So this was in 1963. So they kept it. So later in time, it was discovered because we did not have the telescopes at the time in 63. But in 69, because of the advancement of, mirrors and telescopes, they had discovered a new system. That's where the Zeta Reticuli comes from. And they actually paralleled, the star system to her map, and they discovered it was the same thing. So she had given a map in 63. They made the discovery in 1969. Okay. So I think that is very, very incredible itself. So basically, what happened is that they went back to their lives, and they did get some attention and whatnot and everything, but they tried to live a pretty normal life. So unfortunately, Barney did pass away of a cerebral hemorrhage, a stroke, on February 25th, 1969, at the young age of 46. So anyway, Betty did go on, and she did give a lot of interviews, and she, television interviews, a lot of different interviews along the time, the next decades that went on. And she did pass away, Betty did, of cancer on October 17th, year 2004, at the age of 85, and she did not remarry. So, she and Barney were a unique couple, and they kind of stayed together, throughout eternity and throughout the existence of this phenomena until she did pass away. So I just wanted to bring that story to you guys. I thought it was a very interesting story. And if you guys have any UFO incidents that have happened to you, please call us or please reach out. I would like to hear the story. We're always looking for good ghost tales. So we might go ahead and, in this portion of it, I might add a cool story to end out this podcast. So take a listen to this one. It's pretty neat. But again, thank you for listening, guys. And like I say, just go to the website, which is JJ Allen, ALLEN, ghoststories.com. Reach out if you would like to call us. It's every Sunday at 4 p.m. or a little after Eastern Central Time. It's area code 540-487-9307. We would love to hear your story and put it on air. That'd be great. Or you can just email us if you want to. Just tell the story. Email. It is jjallen1967@gmail.com. And again, as always, thank you for listening. We'll see you on the next one.
My name is Brian. I'm from a small town, and we grew up in the mid-'70s as kids. We lived in the suburbs, and it was a good time. In the summer, it was the best, especially during summer vacation from school. Luckily, my mom was home, Dad worked in a factory. We were average like our neighbors. Everyone had yards, a station wagon, and all the kids played outside all the time. 4 houses down the block was where Rusty lived. Rusty had become my best friend over the short few years we had been alive. I'm 57 now. He was nearly the same age as I. We had started in school together and had been nearly inseparable since. By the time we got a little older and had invested in bikes, we spread out through the neighborhood. Essentially by that time, Rusty and I had graduated from G.I. Joes and Army men, playing in my room, to comic books and building model cars. We had done it all. By the late 70s, things had changed a bit for my best friend. I had noticed a turn in him. He had always been pretty enthusiastic, outgoing. He had turned a bit sullen and harder to talk to. That's when, after a bit of pushing and prodding, he confessed that his home life was different. In the summers, Rusty slept over a lot. I had a bunk bed in my room. We'd stay up to what we thought was late with our flashlights, reading comics, including Mad Magazine, if he was able to swipe a copy. We'd talk, make jokes, and talk about our classmates with either humor or vile criticism. Yeah, but, I guess he was both around 12 in 1979, Rusty had told me, first I had to swear to absolute secrecy, and I did, that his dad was hitting his mom. He told me that they had been arguing more and more often, and it was getting worse. Being 12, you don't know what to do. You're not exactly a child, nor a teenager, or an adult. I felt awful about it. I knew that my home life had always been a good one. We resided in peace. My dad would flare up a bit, but it was the norm. He had never been hostile. I never really feared him, per se. I wish now I had done something to change it all for Rusty. But I was 12. Trying to be the good friend, I told Rusty that if he ever needed to, and if his dad was acting up, to just come over here, bang on my bedroom window, and I'd let him in. To be safe, you know? I was just trying to help. I didn't know what else to do. One night I just woke up. Nothing startled me. I just woke up from a deep sleep and I saw Rusty just standing there in front of my bedroom door. I sat up a bit, and through the ambient light from the plug-in light I still slept with, I saw him. He stood there. He never said a word. I blinked, just trying to establish what was going on, and suddenly he wasn't there. He was gone. I kind of shook it off. I had been dreaming, I thought. Then I just went back to sleep. The next morning after I got up, I noticed my dad was still home. He normally went to work every day. He and Mom sat me down at the breakfast table and slowly explained to me about Rusty. Perhaps they had heard it from the police or the neighbors, but Rusty had been hit by a car in the middle of the night on his bike. I am going to be honest, I was devastated. When you're growing up, things hit you, you move on, you shake it off. I had no choice but to move on with my life. A year later, I started high school with the other kids in the neighborhood. It was different, challenging. I moved on. I graduated, moved on to a business college, got my BA in business, and started in management in an insurance company. I got married, had 2 daughters, and lived life. I will be honest and say I have gone out to Rusty's gravestone and visited him over the decades I have lived. I tell him I am sorry for what happened. I've begged for his forgiveness because I have secretly felt guilty for maybe causing the outcome of his accidental death. No, I didn't do it. But perhaps he was most likely biking to my house in the dark to get to a safe place. I had told him to come, and he died because of it. I have admittedly been to therapy over this. It has helped. I do understand that his death was not my fault. I get it. But still, it haunts me.